Hi, everybody. So we'll get started in a couple moments. How's everyone doing? Have you all gotten started on your projects as of yet? And let me know if you can hear me or if anything is like weird with the audio, so I know to like fix it now. Okay, good. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so it's a couple minutes after midnight, so we'll go ahead and get started. So give me 1 second. Okay, so hello everyone. So welcome to our social engineering workshop this evening. So today we're going to delve into the world of social engineering by understanding some common tactics that are used, how decisions are made, how malicious attackers use emotional triggers, and then some psychological principles behind it. And then, of course, always how to protect yourself from these attacks, of course. So we'll start by defining cybersecurity, right? So what is cybersecurity? So for starters, social engineering is a subset of cybersecurity, so it's important to just define what it is. So cybersecurity is a set of techniques to protect the integrity of networks, programs, and data from attack, damage, or unauthorized access, right? So I have a question for you all. Of these vectors that you see here, poor encryption, DDoS, or social engineering, which do you believe is the easiest attack? And you can just reply in the chat. Yeah, so obviously we're here for a social engineering workshop, so that's going to be the answer. But we're often accustomed to technical attacks in the cybersecurity realm, but social engineering is really overlooked often. And I think that social engineering is the easiest. This is the case because humans are often the most vulnerable access point. So it's important to remember it's not only dumb people who fall for social engineering attacks, it's not just old people who fall for them. We're all vulnerable targets when it comes to this. And just because we're younger or more tech savvy, it doesn't make us exempt, of course. So let's define social engineering. So the definition of social engineering is any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. So social engineering takes the way that humans are designed and exploits those vulnerabilities in the process. So that definition is pretty broad because the intent of social engineering isn't always malicious. It's often used today for actually educational purposes and to find vulnerabilities within organizations. So today we'll be talking about social engineering from the perspective of an educational level and more of like a professional level instead of like malicious intent. Because when we understand how bad guys work, then we're better equipped to defend ourselves from them, basically. So I think it's super important to kind of talk about the foundation and the psychology behind social engineering. So as I said earlier, no one is exempt from it. Nobody is safe from these tactics. And the reason for this is emotion. So as humans, we act on emotion rather than rationale. And so the goal of social engineering is to make you make a decision without thinking first. Because the more you think, the more likely you are to realize that you're being manipulated. So studies have shown that the brain, when it's in alpha mode, it undergoes 8 to 13 cycles per second. So this is the equivalent of daydreaming. When your brain is in beta mode, your brain undergoes 14 to 100 cycles per second. So this is a state where you're more alert. So which state do you guys believe benefits social engineers more? It's obviously going to be the alpha state, the one where the one that benefits you the most is obviously going to be the alpha state because that's when you're less alert. So I think a great example of this, of playing on your emotions, is when you would see those ASPCA commercials. You see a super sad and abused, neglected dog, and there's somber music playing in the background, and the narrator comes on and explains how your small donation could change the lives of these animals, right? So they're using this exactly, yeah, those are the lyrics. So they're using these tactics because they know that your emotions are triggered and you're less likely to think rationally. So the less that you think rationally, the more you act solely on the emotion that's triggered. And that emotion is sadness, and that's what leads you to make the donation rather than any rationale happening. So then at a chemical level, there's also a release of oxytocin, which is closely linked with trust. And oxytocin is released when you feel you trust someone and when you feel that you've earned the trust of someone else. So it goes both ways. And then in addition to that, dopamine is produced in the brain, and it's released during moments of pleasure, happiness, stimulation, etc. So those chemicals can actually just be released during normal conversation. And this is what you would call building rapport. So when you're building that trust with someone, that good rapport, that's exactly the sweet spot like a social engineer wants to get you. Because once you're releasing those chemicals in your brain, they can almost get you to do anything in a way. So some questions for you guys. Once again, this is going to try to be interactive, so I'll definitely be asking questions. So thank you for responding in the chat so far. So what are some common social engineering attacks that you may know of? Scam calls, phishing emails, whaling, keylogging. Any more you can think of? Ghost from a prince in Africa, yeah. Vishing, shoulder surfing, absolutely. Yep, those are all types of attacks. And I was looking for one specifically, but that's okay, we'll cover it right now. So yeah, exactly. You guys are naming like some specific ones, some broader ones, but I believe that most of these can fall under any of these categories here, right? Any of these 4 categories when it comes to social engineering. So the first is vishing. I saw someone mention that. That'd be voice phishing, scam calls, all of those things. Phishing with the PH, that's sending some sort of malicious email. So I saw people comment on that. So whaling would fall under phishing. And then there's actually something called smishing. Exactly. Someone asked, is text phishing smishing? Exactly. So smishing stands for SMS. So that's vulnerability sent over text. And it wasn't very popular before, but I feel like there's been a rise in popularity of it, I think due to the pandemic, so on and so forth. But we'll talk about that a little later. And then lastly, we have impersonation. So that's like the physical aspect of someone masquerading as like a police officer, an employee of a company, and so on and so forth. So we're going to delve deeper into all of these tactics. So the first we have here is smishing. So this is the one that I wanted to start with, as it's, you know, definitely something that's less popular, but is kind of coming to the forefront now. So smishing is an SMS attack, and its goal is to usually introduce malware to your device or steal your credentials. So this tactic is super simple and very effective. It's low cost, rarely can you trace this number back, and it can be spread across to a couple people with just, you know, one click of a button, right? So the key to this attack is that it's super brief. There's no intro, there's no closing, and usually there's about less than 3 steps that the victim has to follow. And then if you can see here in this example here, there's usually a link that you have to follow or click or something similar, right? So with smishing, a mobile breach can mean access to your email, your login credentials, remotely turning on your camera or your microphone. I'm not sure if you all heard about that recent iOS 14 vulnerability, and that was actually a 0-click vulnerability. They just had to send a message and then they could have remote access to your camera or microphone. So it's definitely one that leaves you super vulnerable if you're not careful. So like I was saying, I think this is a tactic that was once underutilized, but has gained popularity due to the pandemic. All of our work and our personal lives are wrapped up in our phones, and you know the bad guys know that, so they're gonna take this avenue to kind of gain access to what they'd like. So within the past year, I don't know about you all, but I have definitely received lots of messages similar to this one. It's like a prompt from Amazon saying that your account has been compromised, or maybe it's a link from UPS or something saying that you can track your package location by clicking on the link. And so as we talked about earlier, oh, you got one from PayPal. Interesting. Okay. So as we talked about earlier, this is a tactic that's once again playing on your emotions and getting you to act quick rather than think it through. So we all get super excited when a package is on the way. I don't know when I don't have a package on the way. So even if I got that text, it wouldn't be suspicious because I always have had something being delivered from Amazon. So we're super excited to go see where it's at. Or maybe we're super concerned about our credentials or something being hacked into our Amazon account. So without thinking, we click on it. And we see that this message is you're inclined to click on it without much investigation. And I think it's also kind of a bit more malicious because when it comes to phishing, sometimes you can like hover over the link and see what it kind of looks like. But within a text message, that's not possible. It's you either click it or you don't, right? And so I've seen mass texts like this go out in like WhatsApp group chats, claiming like discount codes from popular brands. And once again, one misclick without thinking and you'll be left very vulnerable. So that is smishing essentially. So then we come to Vishing. So this stands for voice phishing. So this is conducted via phone call. This is definitely tried and true. You've more than likely heard of this tactic or been on the receiving end of one of them in a spam call. Your car warranty, yes, I get those all the time. It's popular because it's easy, it's cheap, and it can be very profitable if it's successful. And then additionally, the spoof numbers that are used are often calling from outside of the country, and it really can't be traced back easily. So, you know, there's less of a chance of them getting caught as well. So of course, once again, we're talking about social engineering instead of like spam. So we're gonna view phishing through the lens of trying to gain intel on a target. And this can be done in a few ways. So once again, we're going to talk a lot about credential harvesting. So this is a common tactic used on corporations because it often just takes one weak link to gain access to a system. So a call like that could go something like this. So you find out the vendor that this company outsources to for IT. So I go ahead and I call a number at this company. Usually you won't have the number of someone higher up or a CEO or something like that. You have the number of like a receptionist or someone who is kind of on the front lines, right? So you end up calling and you say, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm calling on behalf of this IT company. You know, I was calling to make sure that you ramble off some like tech jargon, talk about servers and Linux and so on and so forth. And you're hoping to get somebody who isn't so technically savvy. Like we're saying, like we get a receptionist or something like that. They're gonna be like, okay, this person probably knows what they're talking about. They do sound like they're from an IT company. So I'm gonna help them out with whatever they need to do. So you could say, hey, I'm gonna send you this link so that I can make sure that all your systems are up and running well. Or I just need to check in with this specific thing. So can you just give me your email so I can figure this out? And if somebody isn't thinking through once again, and they're thinking, you know, not rationally and just acting solely on emotion and just wanting to help out, then boom, we've got our weak link. And that's a way to use Vishing to get more information or credentials from someone at a company. So Vishing can also be a part of OSINT. So OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence, and we'll definitely examine that further in a little bit. So OSINT just means collecting more information on a target. So maybe you'd actually like to verify some details on a potential target. And in order to do that, maybe you did some background research and you find that this target frequents like Marriott hotels or something like that. Maybe they stayed in Miami recently. And you were able to figure that out through like preliminary research. Oh my goodness, I just read this comment from Charles. The ones I get have my name in them. Yep, yeah, it's really easy to get your name, your number, your address. Like they're gonna use whatever they can to really try to make it sound convincing. But anyways, back to the scenario when it comes to OSINT. Let's say that this target is in Miami. They frequent Marriott hotels, and you want to get some more information from them or just verify some information you have about them. So once again, we call and we're under the guise of a receptionist from the Marriott in Miami. So you say, hello, Mr. Target. That's not their name, whatever their name is. We really hope you enjoyed your stay with us during these times, if you end up having that. We're just conducting a short survey to understand how people enjoyed their stay. So can you just verify your first name and last name for us? Verify your phone number, your email address, and the last 4 digits on your credit card number. Something like that. Something under the guise of like, okay, this is what a hotel company would need. If this person is not thinking and you catch them like at the right time, those are easy ways to like kind of give up that information without thinking very much. So that's a way to gather OSINT, and then also further just verify information on a target. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. You said you can't hear anything. I am speaking. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, thank you guys. Okay, so a very skilled social engineer can take a scenario and really use it to their advantage. So maybe they'll call with like a super distressed voice, and they're like pleading from the person in the IT department to help them like recover their credentials because they left their work device at home and they're on vacation. A lot of times, once again, bringing up this theme of emotion, people like to be of help. People like to be of assistance. They want to be the hero in the situation. So they're going to come up with some solution and give up more information than they're probably willing to in order to kind of help you in your situation. So social engineers also play on the emotion of somebody that they're calling to also just like make themselves sound more distressed. So basically, in summation, this is a really powerful attack vector. But when it comes to Vishing and you're doing it professionally, you can't be afraid of the phone. You want to be successful in this, so you have to have confidence. You have to have the ability to like kind of modify and adapt your script. And then you have to build that trust and rapport with the target in order to make the attempt successful. There's a new technique that can mimic your family's phone number. Yes, yeah, exactly. Just like Natalie said, spoofing. They can kind of say that you're from like kind of any location, etc. Once they found out that I'm from Florida, I keep getting random calls from different cities in Florida, and I'm like, you know, how did they get my number, etc. So, okay. So the next attack vector that we're going to talk about is phishing. So this is certainly the one that's most talked about. It's the most commonly referenced attack. And this is, of course, the act of sending malicious emails that pretend to be from reputable sources. So the goal of this is usually to deliver malicious payloads to your device to allow attackers to gain remote access. And once again, from that remote access, they can gather credentials and just further intel on you in general. So we'll divvy this attack into 2 categories. So phishing can be utilized for educational purposes as well as pen testing purposes. So a client that hires a social engineer may want to test the human side of their company rather than vulnerabilities in their network. So when emails are sent to test their employees, there's usually no malicious code that's executed. Just when they click the link, there's like a report back that somebody fell for this message, essentially. So if you work at any sizable company at all, you have more than likely received some sort of training or like warning against clicking these emails. And if by some chance you did fall for the test, you may have to review that training again because they know that you fell for it. But yeah, so one fish doesn't fit all situations. So for instance, at a company that I worked for, they would occasionally send out, you know, Grubhub or Uber Eats vouchers to kind of treat their employees to lunch. So personally, if I received a Grubhub voucher or something like that in my inbox, I'm way more inclined to click on it than I am something else. For like LinkedIn or something like that, because I'm expecting something like that to come into my inbox. So yeah, free food, exactly. So that'd be something that you have to be a little bit more cautious about. So these tactics have also been used by HR. So they're offering like free iPhone upgrades, and all you have to do is enter your work email and credentials, and you'll be added to this list. And you'd actually be surprised how many people fall for that tactic. So once again, we're playing on those emotions. So in that case, the emotion could be like excitement, curiosity, or just greed. I want a new iPhone, so I'm going to sign up, and they don't think much of it. So in the situation of utilizing phishing for pen testing, It differs from educational purposes because the simple fact is the intent is malicious and there's some exploit that's going to result from it. And usually when it comes to those kinds of phishing attacks that are malicious, the emotion that they're trying to play on is invoking some sort of like fear within you. So yes, so I have an example here of a phishing email that people have probably received before sometime during this pandemic. And there's like a couple kind of giveaways that this is definitely a phishing email. So I don't know if this picture is large enough, but if you guys can like spot some of those things, feel free to comment below because I'm curious on what you all see and it's like, ugh, this looks a little fishy. Yeah, exactly. The domain is just weird. Accounts at Maison.com. That doesn't make very much sense. Yep, like Aiden said, the link itself, when you hover over it, it's something completely different. It's just shortened like bit.ly, like bit.ly, whatever link. So that's also kind of a dead giveaway. Is there anything else that you guys kind of notice? Okay. Yeah, Austin. Stuff like that, you have to like look at it a little closely. So this one is like, I don't want to say kind of convincing. Once again, if we look at, yeah, the formatting is really off. It doesn't look super professional like it was sent from the company of Amazon. Very vague, exactly. This is one thing that I noticed that I'm not really sure. Yeah, dear customer, they didn't use your name. These are really good ones, guys, that you got. That's really good that you're pointing this out. I don't know if you see here at the bottom where it says, we hope you found this message to be useful. However, if you'd rather not receive future emails or this sort from Amazon, please visit that opt-out link below. And there's another link. Yeah, there's bad spacing. Personally, whenever I have received an actual security message to make sure that I authenticate or verify my account, they wouldn't ever tell me to stop subscription or to not want to receive future emails. The whole point of receiving emails from a company is to protect you, and you want to keep receiving those. So personally with Amazon, maybe I have to like check some other ones. They've never given me an option to opt out. So that's also something that you just have to be a little cautious of and just, you know, take note of. Yeah, and so I did see a couple of you, they mentioned like bad spacing and just overall formatting. Believe it or not, today there are actually whole companies that are dedicated and they exist to proofread these phishing emails and edit them so that they can actually be more convincing. So they're getting better and better. Yeah, pay me Bitcoin or else I'm gonna steal your Amazon. Exactly. So yeah, here we go. We're gonna talk about ransomware, like kind of Natalie just talked about. So ransomware is threatening to release some sort of information about you, harm you or a family member, or just something to that effect in exchange for money or not following the commands that they've given you, such as, you know, download this software and we won't do anything, right? So today, like Natalie was saying, I've seen ransomware emails that demand payment in Bitcoin. And of course, people fall for this, they meet the request, and there's no guarantee that their information is going to be restored, that their information is going to be protected. And a lot of times they don't really even have access to your information. They just kind of fake it until, yeah, they make it, yeah, whaling. Yeah, we're going to get into that too. So then next we have spear phishing. So this is just phishing, but a lot more targeted and a lot more kind of narrowed in. So it's used against someone that you already have a bit of detailed information about. So let's say your target, you know their colleagues and their coworkers' names. Maybe you know some of their friends and family, and you put that in your email and attempt to get them to trust you. So it's just like, hey, enjoyed, I don't know, lunch with you or something like that. Make sure you like cash at me this with something and you drop their like friends or family's name or their colleagues' names. And, you know, that's going to be able to help you build that trust a little bit too. And then whaling is super similar to spear phishing as well, but this is even more targeted. And the fact is, I think they call it whaling because you're trying to get a larger target, right? So this is aimed at like executives or CEOs. And because this attack is so targeted, it often goes unnoticed by like system admins because, you know, when a mass email goes out, that definitely reaches their radar, they see that. But if it's going to one specific person, the chances of catching that are a lot, lower, and the potential damage it could cause is massive. So yes, people have been known for whaling there. I'm trying to keep up with the chat too. I got a phishing email from FIU telling me to fill out the P3 app. Oh my gosh, that's interesting. I haven't received that. Okay, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with Kali Linux, and if not, it's just a super powerful OS when it comes to cybersecurity. But Kali Linux actually comes with various pre-installed tools for exploitation, and one of them is called SET, S-E-T, and that stands for Social Engineering Toolkit. So as you can see, there's actually an option here to send out a mass mail attack, and all you have to do is fill out who you're sending it to, what email you want to be sent from, so what you want to spoof as, what kind of files you want to add to it, and if you want to add a flag of importance, so when it gets to somebody's inbox, it's high importance, so on and so forth, right? So then it drafts it all up for you, makes it as convincing. I'm gonna say convincing. It's still a tool that is not I don't know, that's advanced and special, but it can make a pretty convincing email, and it sends it out for you via SMTP, so Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. So that's a crazy tool that you can actually just go ahead and check out if you'd like. You don't have to be a hacker or anything like that. You can just go play around with it. So if you have Kali Linux, you can check that out. But of course, it's for educational purposes, not malicious purposes. You can get in a lot of trouble for that. So it's just kind of interesting to see how that works out. But yeah, there's actually pre-installed tools for that already. Okay, and so lastly, we're coming to impersonation. So impersonation is the physical impersonation of an employee for the target company or someone in authority who can be trusted, like law enforcement, utility workers, pest control, etc. So this attack requires the most planning and is basically the riskiest attack of any of the ones that we've discussed. So in other attacks, you never really have to face your target. And when you're physically in person and facing your target, all of their senses are engaged. So their alertness is super high. And once again, that is kind of the enemy of the social engineer. You want their guard to be as low as possible. So if you're hired by a company for a kind of impersonation social engineering job, the risk is lower because you're actually paid to do this, and it's planned and it's for educational purposes. However, those with actual malicious intent, if you're caught, you can face lots of time in prison. So in cybersecurity, you often probably heard about Red Team, and that's essentially the offensive team tasked with finding vulnerabilities. And this kind of encompasses the physical security. So those are the people going in at night and trying to breach the physical security. So elevators, picking locks, disarming alarms, and security cameras, etc. So impersonation is also considered offensive, but it's focused on people rather than physical. So instead of picking a lock, you're trying to get someone to hand you the keys or to buzz you in with their badge, or something called tailgating, which is actually following in behind somebody through a doorway or an entryway. So as we talked about earlier, the emotional aspect plays a huge role in this. So we want the oxytocin and the dopamine and all of those levels to be high and flowing. And you just want to build a rapport and make that victim trust you as much as possible, so there's less suspicion. And as mentioned before, this takes an extensive amount of planning, and you have to draft the perfect pretext for the specific situation. So we'll actually elaborate on pretext later. So questions you can ask are what is my purpose for being here? What clothing or props will I need? Will my props be new? Do they look a little used? What are my goals once I get into the building? Am I allowed to compromise a server? Am I allowed to remove a device? All of those things you have to consider before just kind of showing up at a building. So these are all facets of pretext and planning. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. So here are some kind of malicious intent impersonation and physical attacks that can be used. So this is kind of like an old one, USB dropping. It's definitely utilized less because no one uses USBs anymore, but people used to use them all the time, like back in the 2000s, mid 2000s, and people would love to accept them for free. So all you had to do was probably just offer them in the break room, put them in a bin and say like, take one. If you drop one on the floor, more than likely someone is going to pick it up and take it and put it into their machine just because they want to keep a USB drive. So from there, you can deploy any malware that you want, remotely access their system if you'd like, all from just dropping a USB on the ground because you gain access to a place physically. And then in the middle, does anyone know what a honeypot is? Yeah, who doesn't like free stuff? Okay, so yeah. So a honeypot can actually be defined in a couple ways. So Diego says seduce. Trapping the hackers, exactly. So first, the one that's like commonly known is sending an attractive woman, an attractive person in general, in order to create kind of like a diversion. So maybe she'd like flirt with the target and they're like more inclined to give up information. But sometimes it doesn't even require that. Studies have shown that prettier people are seen as more trustworthy, and that's something called the halo effect. So yeah, that's just sending in an attractive person to just get somebody kind of like thrown off. And then we also have digital honeypots now. So I'm sure you've seen like Instagram spam comments of like a bot pretending to be like a really beautiful woman. And they're like, hey, just click on this link to talk to me a little bit more, and like so on and so forth. Now we don't have to send in a physical person. We can just create like an Instagram account for that. And then lastly, a honeypot doesn't even have to be like a person. An example of this could be like you setting up an iPad with a sign, once again, in like the break room or something like that. And the sign says, you know, enter this raffle to win a new iPhone or a cruise sweepstakes or something like that. And in that kind of survey, you have people write their name, their email, their phone number, their address, work email, whatever. This is also considered a honeypot because you kind of set up a trap and it requires no intervention, and the victims kind of come straight to you. You don't really have to do that. Okay, so yeah, and then of course we just have straight up physical theft. So someone takes your laptop from the library or the coffee shop when you get up to go to the restroom, someone takes your phone, etc. That's just as big of a breach as well, just taking your device. Okay, so here's some common uniforms that are pretty easy to get a hold of, and you can replicate if you wanted to conduct a physical impersonation. So this Amazon or UPS delivery person uniform, I saw that straight on eBay for like $30. So all you have to do is pick that up. So specifically relating to a delivery person, a tactic that could be related is called diversion theft. So this is when you trick a postal service person to drop a delivery in a location that it wasn't originally intended for. So if you want to hang around the site that you know that something is being delivered to, but you don't want it to make it to that location, you can kind of convince another kind of UPS person to say, like, no, drop it here, and then boom, you can like steal that package. So the second one, I think this is a pretty good disguise, if you will, only because you could be a sanitation worker, you could be a building safety and construction person. And these are kind of roles that you often see at work sites, and people just kind of, you know, ignore you and carry on. Especially when they're wearing these things, maybe if you have like a clipboard or things like that, people have been known to put a badge within that clipboard and like just wave it in front of kind of sensors, and boom, they've gained access to a door and they didn't look suspicious at all. And then, yeah, so speaking of ID badges, super duper easy to replicate with just Photoshop. And you just put a lanyard on that matches the company and you fit right in. So those are all different ways to like impersonate someone. Yeah, bring a ladder wherever you go. Exactly, yeah. If, you know, people are, if you look the part and you dress the part, people are not going to think twice about it. Okay, so this is a quote from Chris Hagnaghi, and he's one of the greats in like social engineering today. And I absolutely love how simply it's put and how honest it is. But social engineering is not politically correct. So I actually have a poll set up And here are, I'm going to give you a few scenarios when it comes to these three people. Keep in mind, there's no right answer. Some of these people may even overlap for some of these scenarios, but I'm just kind of curious of like where your heads are at and what you'd believe when it comes to the scenarios and who you would choose. So I'm going to go ahead and like post, it could be B. I'm going to go ahead and like post the poll and let me know if it like shows up, because this is my first time using, what's it called? The polls on Hopin. So, okay. So my question for you is, of these three persons, who would you choose to be an executive at a corporate firm? So let me know if y'all can see the poll. Okay, or you could comment if you'd like, Dr. Fauci. I'm sorry, that's funny. Okay. Dr. Fauci. Okay. Maybe, I don't know how to, oh, I can show the results. Okay, great. Okay, maybe you guys can't see the polls, but anyways, it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and vote in the chat then. I see a lot of A's. I see someone who says C, looks like a tech CEO, old white man. Yeah, okay, alrighty. Okay, so let's see if I gave you a second scenario. So who would you choose if we're trying to put the scenario of someone as a line cook in a restaurant? Who would you choose then? Okay, I see some A's. I see some C's. I see lots of C's. Okay, I see an A. Oh, okay. Can you all see the polls now? Let me go ahead and see. Okay, I see you guys voting on the polls now. Okay, great. All right, and then lastly, we'll keep it moving. Who would you all choose for someone who works at an assisted senior living facility? Okay, I see A and I see C. I see a B. Okay. Interesting. Okay, these are some interesting responses, and that's great. This is exactly what I wanted to like kind of talk about here. I saw a lot of A's for person A. When we think of somebody who's an executive, we often think of male, white, and old. So I think he would be a great shoo-in for that. When it comes to a line cook or maybe a profession that's within the service industry, we think of somebody who's a little younger. This person has tattoos, so like maybe that'd be the perfect profession for them. And then we talked about someone living in an assisted senior living facility. So usually we may associate women with like caretaker roles like that or being in positions like that. So these are all people that we use for pretext. So I like this quote that's saying social engineering is not politically correct, because in actuality, any of these people could have any of those roles because we live in 2021 and it doesn't really matter, you know? But my point here is that since our world is so inclusive and it's moving towards that, that's great, because that means there's room for kind of everyone within the social engineering field. We're going to need all kinds of people to fill these roles, you know, younger people, middle-aged people, people of different nationalities and backgrounds to fit whatever pretext that we have kind of going on. Yep. Corey said the answer is always it depends, and that's exactly true. So yeah, so any of these people could have had that role, but we kind of want to go with our innate biases because that's going to create the least amount of suspicion. And as we keep talking about, social engineers want your alert down, they want your suspicion down. So go ahead and choose the one that your kind of bias goes to instead of the one that's like politically correct, if you will. So yeah, so thank you guys for participating in that. I appreciate it. So, okay, we're getting close to the end. But first I kind of wanted to talk about this basic kind of social engineering pyramid that has about 5 layers. And this is what encompasses a well thought out and planned attack. So professionals, when it comes to social engineering, they really take their time when it comes to gathering information. So that's OSINT right there at the bottom. That is really the base and the foundation of everything you do going forward. And then the next level would be pretext development. So figuring out the how of operation. Then we go to actually attack planning, so the who, what, when of the operation, and then launching the attack, so actually just carrying it out. And then lastly, that certainly should not be overlooked and is super important when you're doing this professionally, is reporting. So it's a detailed and professional report of what you did. So we'll go ahead and elaborate on all of that as well. So like I said, I mentioned OSINT a couple times before. So this stands for Open Source Intelligence. I'm so sorry. And so this information is basically the starting point of every engagement, regardless of the type of attack that you're going to use. And it's the foundation of everything you do going forward. So this is the process of gaining intel on your target. So with the amount of data information online, you simply can't just say, hi, get me everything I need on this target. You have to have a really clear idea of what you're looking for in order to narrow down your search. So in this case, like we talked about spear phishing, it's probably important to know what the target's favorite hobbies are, what their likes and dislikes are, establishments that they may frequent. When it comes to vishing, with voice phishing, you may want to know their job title, so they know that you're expecting a certain call from like a certain office, and you can spoof as that location, whatever. And then for impersonation and physical and in-person attacks, you have to delve a lot deeper. So what does my target have access to? Who do they have meetings with frequently? What vendors does this corporation use? Where are the call centers and the headquarters located? Is there an employee organization chart anywhere? Those are all like kind of basic scratching the surface places to start when it comes to OSINT. So we live in a super digital landscape, and it's easier than ever to gather information on someone because of sites like this. So let's say, for instance, someone wanted to gather some intel on me. It really would not take much digging to draw some basic conclusions. So they're like, okay, I know Lillian is a young adult and she is in college, so let's figure out some things on her. So I want to know her hobbies, her interests, where she attends school, what she studies, so on and so forth. So here's an example. Just on LinkedIn, when it comes to the events, you can kind of say that you're joining an event and let your network know. So if someone came across that, they're like, oh, okay, it looks like she's been accepted to ShellHacks. It's an event where computing students go. It seems like people who are within the discipline of CS and IT or engineering attend. So I'm gonna go draw the conclusion that Lillian is majoring in one of those majors. And although it's a virtual hackathon, I can see that it's based in Florida. So maybe we're gonna conclude that I live here in Florida. And we're like, okay, great, look. It says that it's being hosted by FIU's UPE organization. So maybe she's a part of that as well. So maybe she attends school at FIU too. And the list can keep going on, and that's just from like one piece of information that's saying that I am attending ShellHacks. So if they actually followed that rabbit hole, they would be very correct in all of those assumptions. And so yeah, so that's just LinkedIn. But then we bring in Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and then you're able to, the solution is to lead a double life, exactly. So then they can come and see what vacations you took, what hotels you stayed at, what airline you flew with. I know some people have taken like wingtip pictures, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like know they flew like Spirit or like Southwest or something, just by seeing like little details like that. So obviously it's generally a good idea to keep your accounts private. I'm guilty of that. I don't really keep my accounts private, but I definitely should. But yeah, so that's just OSINT in general. Collecting as much information you can from like public sources. Okay, so now we get into pretext and attack planning. So those are the next two tiers above OSINT. So pretext is super crucial, and it cannot be drafted without your OSINT first. And pretext is where you kind of figure out the angle that you're gonna go in at. So what scenario would you craft in order to guarantee access? I don't know if I still have people in the chat, but if you want, like, give me a good kind of scenario that would like make sure like you definitely have access to a building, like surefire, foolproof, like whatever. Multiple, even triple. Okay, so you're saying like maybe have triple or multiple like pretexts? Probably. But okay, so kind of what I'm saying here is a lot of people would say, oh, I'll just like come as a UPS delivery person or something like that, which is a good one. You'll get to the front desk. yeah, getting an ID badge from an employee. But yeah, so when it comes to a UPS delivery person, you rarely see them walking around the building, you know, going between halls and things like that. If you really want to get in, maybe you'll disguise yourself as like pest control or something like that, because that's someone that you see within the building actually doing maintenance, moving around, etc. So that's why it's super important that you want to choose a pretext that's going to guarantee you access. So yeah, so this is also when you're making changes to ensure, bring a ladder. This is when you're making changes to ensure success and figure out what tools you may need. Do you need spy gear? Do you need special props like a ladder, a toolbox, a clipboard, whatever? And then then attack planning is the who, what, and the when. So what does the client want you to do? When is the best time to launch this attack? Is it midday, at night, in the morning? And then who do you need available during the attack to support you? So do you need a colleague with you? Does it need to be a two-person job to provide assistance? So on and so forth. Okay, and then we get to the last part, the last two tiers. So that's attack launching and reporting. So once you've done all of those steps, great, you can launch your attack, you can go full steam ahead and carry it out. So once you've prepared extensively. So you may be able to like follow a script or some outline, but when you follow this, you have to be super duper dynamic, you have to be adaptable and flexible, get ready for, you know, whatever's gonna be thrown at you. And usually you have to define with the client what you can and cannot do. So like we discussed earlier, am I allowed to access their servers? Am I allowed to take devices from the building? Am I allowed to even like record this? So social engineers usually have like pen cams or button cams or just other spy gear in order to record their steps and their interactions throughout the attack. But you definitely want to fully discuss the scope of this so your client knows what you're doing and you have the permissions to do exactly that. And then this is like the boring part, but like I said, it's a super important part that you shouldn't overlook, and that's reporting absolutely everything that you did. So you want to have a clear and detailed report that's also professional, that went over everything that you did and disclose that all to your client. So starting all the way from OSINT and typing in like what you searched to find out information, all the way to the conclusion of the actual attack. So holding back any information from them can like lead to distrust, and you're basically hired to really make light of any potential breaches. So anything that you see as a potential breach, you should be required to report and record basically. So yeah, so it's important to provide them also with next steps and how to secure those vulnerabilities going forward. So that's part of your job as well. I found this is how you can secure this going forward. So yeah, so those are all of the tiers when it comes to a social engineering attack and how to prep, plan, and do all of the steps encompassed. So yes, now I get to, how do we just protect ourselves from all of this, right? So the biggest thing is just slowing down and thinking. So like we talked about, the goal of a social engineer is to get you to act on emotion rather than rationale. So just taking a few minutes to inspect the text that was sent to you or the email that was offered to you, you know, take a minute, and that can make all the difference between clicking on a link and being exploited that way. So in addition to that, be observant and cautious. So in the case of Vishing, if you get a call from someone unknown, even if you do pick it up, I think someone mentioned that in the chat earlier, just like don't pick it up if you don't want to. But yeah, so if you think it's a little fishy, you can say, hey, I'm gonna call this number back. How do I get this representative or something like that? Oftentimes, if it's a spam call, you can't call that number back. And if you do, you're not gonna speak with the same person you spoke to. And usually that's kind of like an indicator or a red flag that it's not really a reputable company. So there's that as well. So in the case of impersonation, if you're working somewhere and somebody comes and does an attack like this and you're just not sure, don't just trust someone and what they say right off the bat. Definitely be super cautious. So observe their dress and their demeanor, and just don't be afraid to get a second opinion from a coworker before giving out information. So, hey, is this person supposed to be here? Do you know them? You know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, getting a second opinion, basically. Before you go and give out information. And then once again, do not trust a link. If it looks fishy, just don't click on it. If the URL looks off, it's kind of best to access your account directly from the company site and investigate it that way. So like the Amazon example that we saw, when I get, Windows Defender is great, exactly. So when I get emails like that, I sometimes won't just like click on the link. I'll just go straight to Amazon myself, go through my account. Usually there's some security portion somewhere where it says if you've been compromised or not, and go through it that way. So then on top of that, when it comes to link, be super cautious about your downloads as well. So I know people always send free textbook links in our WhatsApp group chats and things like that. Usually it should be fine, but maybe go and look for it yourself if you want to be sure, to make sure that it's not malicious or anything like that that you're downloading. So be careful about that. And then lastly, if it's, not lastly, almost lastly, but if it sounds too good to be true, it really often is. Like we talked about, I've gotten crazy calls about winning cruise sweepstakes or raffles that I didn't sign up for. But those tactics are still used because people still fall for them. So our parents fall for them, our older friends and family sometimes fall for them. So go ahead and just equip them with this information so they can protect themselves as well. And of course, just secure your devices. So like Anthony just said, Windows Defender, things that search for malware, VPNs, like all of those things are super important in protecting your devices. If there's some sort of two-factor authentication available, go ahead and utilize it. Make super complex passwords. And if you have to use a password manager, go ahead and use that, but just never ever write them down or put them in your notes app. Definitely have been guilty of that in the past. Just don't do that. Yeah, and so most email services are pretty good at filtering out spam emails, but if yours isn't, you can just go to your kind of settings and make sure that you've adjusted them to put it on like high alert and make sure that those get flagged. So that's a little bit about how to protect yourselves. And that's all we have for today. So thank you. I hope you guys were able to kind of gain something from this. Always take your security seriously and pay super close attention to those like annoying kind of company mandated security trainings that we get. We have to get them because somebody always falls for them. So we have to be careful. Yeah, so it's important to note that being a social engineer is a very real profession. It's not just about like breaking into banks. We always see like movies like that. It's kind of admin work. It's like professional speech, being an effective writer and communicator, all of those things are encompassed in social engineering. So if that's like something that you're interested in, then it's something that I think you should look into. So yeah, it's a really super cool profession. And yeah, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And happy hacking. Thank you guys for attending. I know it's already late, but yeah. Thank you all. My LinkedIn, sure. Let me get that for you right now. Here we go. There's my LinkedIn. You guys can drop yours in the chat if you'd like as well. Yeah, thank you guys for attending. What's my bank password? Yeah, I'll type it in right now. Okay. My social security, you're close. I'm not gonna do it. But yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I have not tried a ladder strategy. I personally have not had to do like an in-person impersonation, so no. I once tricked a scammer into thinking I was another scammer at the place he worked. So that's funny. That's good. I want to hear that story. Oh, okay. Matthew, yeah, definitely. When I type out my password, it won't be seen by everyone. It'll be invisible, right? Yeah, no, I'm not doing the hacking servers workshop. Someone else is going to do that, but I really, really recommend you guys go. He's super talented and knowledgeable when it comes to those things. You guys are funny. You got jokes. Yeah, thank you guys. Okay, so we're about 5 minutes from closing. So if you have any questions, let me know, or else I'll go ahead and close out the room. But you should know that there's still events. Yeah, there's still lots of games and events coming up. So if you're tired, go and get a little coffee or maybe take like a quick nap break because there's a lot going on. Yes, and the hacking server session should be at 1 a.m. So same place. But yeah, all right. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night. Happy hacking. And I'll see you guys a little later. Okay. Bye. Oh, this question? How do you not be obvious about getting info? That's a good question, Daniel. Okay. So every situation is different, but like I said, the rapport is super important. So just building trust is going to be the biggest thing when it comes to like not being obvious. So I don't know if you mean for like in-person attacks or vishing, but the more confident you are, the less people are going to suspect. You can't be overly confident either, or like too happy or too giddy. You just kind of have to be as normal as possible. Maybe like mention the weather and just be like a normal human being talking to someone, and they're going to let their guard down a lot easier. I don't know if that answers your question. Oh, how do you not be about getting info? Well, yeah, just kind of slip it into information, like everyday conversation, basically. Throw some jargon at them that they don't understand so you can kind of get them disoriented a bit. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yes. For everyone else, good night. Thank you all.